The morning of June 4th, 2026, inside the European Parliament, staff sit down at their desks. They open their browsers, the way they have every single morning for years. Something is different. Google is gone. In its place, Quant, a French search engine. No tracking, no personal data collection, no American legal reach, 720 lawmakers, thousands of staff, all of them on the same morning using a different tool than they used the day before. This was not an IT glitch. It was not a routine software update buried in some technical memo. This was the visible tip of something that had been building quietly for months. Because 3 days later, a coalition of European companies is set to release a full replacement for Microsoft Office itself. And on that very same morning, June 4th, the European Commission publishes new legislation. Legislation that will make American cloud providers' access to European government data restricted by law. 3 events, 1 continent, 1 week. So here is the question worth sitting with. How does a continent of 450 million people decide almost overnight to fire the most powerful software company in the world? The answer starts 2 weeks earlier, with a leak, with names, with real people who are about to find out exactly what it means to store their work inside an American system. In the Netherlands, 2 government agencies do a quiet, unglamorous job. The Authority for Consumers and Markets, the Dutch Data Protection Authority. Their task, enforce the Digital Services Act, Europe's law forcing online platforms to remove illegal content, child exploitation material, and disinformation. It is not controversial work. It is regulatory work. The kind of work civil servants do every day in every country without anyone noticing. Then, in May, a Dutch investigative outlet broke a story. Microsoft had handed over internal communications, emails, meeting minutes, calendar invitations to a committee inside the United States House of Representatives. The names were not removed. The committee was investigating something it called tech censorship. From its point of view, European regulators enforcing the Digital Services Act were not protecting citizens. They were suppressing American companies. So the names of the Dutch officials doing that enforcement work ended up unredacted inside a congressional file in Washington. Meta reportedly handed over similar materials. Other American firms reportedly received the same kind of requests. The Dutch government called it extremely worrying, not because of what was in the documents, because of what could happen next. European officials who end up identified in a politically charged American congressional investigation have in the past faced travel restrictions, personal sanctions. 5 Europeans involved in tech policy work already experienced exactly that in 2025. These were not spies. They were not activists. They were people doing their assigned jobs, enforcing a law their own government passed. And one American company's internal systems became the conduit that put their names on a desk in Washington. The Dutch State Secretary for Digital Economy confronted the U.S. ambassador directly. Her words, "If you have a problem, you fight it out with us, or, if necessary, in Europe, but not against the backs of civil servants." That sentence did more to move European governments than any policy paper written in the last decade, because it proved something European officials had only theorized about until that point. Running your government's work through American software does not mean your data sits in Europe. It means your data sits wherever Washington decides it needs to look. There is one more detail in this story that the Dutch cabinet was already wrestling with when the leak broke. A company called Solvinity, the Dutch IT provider responsible for hosting DigiD, the country's national digital identity system, was at that exact moment in the process of being acquired by an American company. Once that acquisition closes, Solvinity falls under the same legal reach that exposed the names of those civil servants. A petition against the sale gathered nearly 200,000 signatures in a matter of weeks. So picture the position the Dutch government found itself in. The agency identifying numbers of nearly every citizen in the country sitting inside infrastructure that was about to change hands to a buyer who would, by law, answer to Washington first. That is not a hypothetical risk anymore. That is the same mechanism that exposed the regulators about to attach itself to the identity system of an entire nation. Here is the part that matters for understanding everything that follows. Microsoft did not choose to do this. American companies operate under a law called the Cloud Act, passed in 2018. Think of it as a master key. If a company is incorporated in the United States, American authorities can compel that company to produce data it holds anywhere in the world, regardless of where the servers physically sit. A data center in Frankfurt, a data center in Amsterdam, it does not matter. If the company answering the request is American, American law reaches straight through the wall. This particular case ran through a related but distinct channel, a congressional committee's subpoena power, investigating what it framed as platform censorship. But the underlying exposure is the same one the Cloud Act created. American jurisdiction follows the company, not the server. This is not even the first time European regulators have run into this wall. Back in 2020, Europe's highest court issued a ruling that became known as Schrems II. The case centered on a simple question: can European data transferred to American companies ever truly be protected under European privacy law? The court's answer was no, not reliably, because American surveillance law could override any contractual promise an American company made. That ruling sat in the background for years, discussed by lawyers, footnoted in compliance reports, mostly ignored by anyone running an actual government ministry, because the alternative was too expensive and too disruptive to take seriously. The Dutch leak did something that ruling alone never managed to do. It turned an abstract legal finding into a list of real names. For years, American cloud providers sold European governments on a promise. Your data stays in Europe. We have local data centers, local compliance. That promise was always built on a foundation that could be overridden the moment Washington decided to look. Schrems II said so in theory. The Dutch case proved it in practice. Now think about what that actually means, not for a Dutch regulator, but for anyone reading this in Ohio, in Manchester, in Toronto. Every email sitting in an Outlook account, every file sitting in OneDrive, every meeting recorded inside Microsoft Teams. If a foreign government can quietly request the names of European officials inside that exact same corporate infrastructure, what protects an ordinary account holder from the same legal mechanism pointed in a different direction? This is not a European problem. Europe simply got the proof first. Once the proof existed, the response was not a strongly worded statement. It was a systematic, methodical replacement of the entire American software stack, layer by layer, institution by institution. Search came first. The European Parliament's move to Quant, French, no tracking, outside American legal jurisdiction, then Office productivity. June 9th, EuroOffice launches publicly, built by a coalition of European companies, Ionos, Nextcloud, XWiki, open project among them. Documents, spreadsheets, presentations, real-time collaboration, a familiar interface, full compatibility with existing Microsoft files, and critically, zero exposure to the legal mechanism that put Dutch officials' names in Washington. Ionos' chief executive said it plainly. After the geopolitical developments of the last year, Europe needs a fully Microsoft-compatible sovereign alternative. One public institutions can deploy without licensing fees, without American servers, and without that legal reach of applying to a single byte of data. Then operating systems. France announced its entire government is migrating from Windows to Linux. Every ministry, every public institution, then video conferencing. France is replacing Microsoft Teams and Zoom with Visio, a domestically built platform, across every public institution by 2027. Then comes the layer most people never think about at all, the cloud infrastructure sitting underneath everything else. In France, a company called Thales is building a sovereign cloud entity, S3NS, wrapping foreign cloud technology inside a legal structure governed entirely by European law. A similar entity is being built in Germany. In the Netherlands, a provider called Stackit is now supplying sovereign cloud capacity directly to the Dutch government. A separate joint venture between KP and Thales is constructing a sovereign military cloud specifically built to keep defense data away from any foreign legal reach entirely. Mistral, the French AI company, is building hyperscale data centers on European soil, financed by European banks, with chip manufacturer ASML among the backers. The European Union itself is funding 5 AI gigafactories across the continent, explicitly designed to remove dependence on American compute infrastructure for the next generation of artificial intelligence. Then artificial intelligence at the consumer layer. Ecosaya, the German search engine with over 25 million monthly users, switched its underlying AI system to a European provider. Then satellites. The European Commission has moved to block Starlink from accessing a specific spectrum band needed for satellite communication, while a project called Iris Squared is being built specifically to remove European dependence on Starlink for the continent's own satellite network. Then payments. A system called Wero is being built to give Europe a continental payment network that does not route through Visa or MasterCard at all. Each one of these on its own could look like a routine procurement decision, a budget line item, a modernization project. But look at what they have in common. None of them are about saving money. None of them are about better features. Every single one is about a government regaining the legal right to keep its own communications private, to make sure that if there is ever a disagreement with Washington, the names of the people doing the disagreeing don't end up in a congressional file by accident. Step back and look at the pattern as a whole. The European Parliament replacing its search engine. The European Commission publishing new restrictions on American cloud providers on the exact same morning. Euro Office launching 5 days later. France abandoning Windows. France abandoning Teams and Zoom. Sovereign cloud entities rising in France, Germany, and the Netherlands. A military-grade cloud joint venture in the Netherlands. 5 AI gigafactories funded across the continent. Germany's largest independent search engine abandoning American AI. A new satellite network being built to bypass Starlink, with the spectrum band itself now restricted. A continental payment system built to bypass Visa and MasterCard. Different countries, different institutions, different procurement officers, different budgets, different timelines that started long before any of this made headlines. And yet, all of it converging in the same compressed window. June 2026. That is not a coordinated press release. It is something more telling than that. It is what happens when dozens of separate institutions independently arrive at the same uncomfortable conclusion because the evidence supporting that conclusion has become impossible to look away from. The tech sovereignty package, published by the European Commission in that same morning, is the part that turns all of this from a trend into a mandate. It establishes the legal framework requiring European preference in procurement for digital services handling sensitive government data. It is not a suggestion document. It is the mechanism that makes this replacement permanent rather than temporary. Microsoft did not lose this ground to a better competitor. It lost this ground because one leak with real names attached proved something no marketing department could undo. None of this stays in Europe. If an American congressional committee can end up holding the names of foreign civil servants sourced from inside an American company's own systems, the question that follows is uncomfortable but unavoidable. What protects the average account holder in the United States from that same architecture? Every file in OneDrive, every email in Outlook, every meeting recorded in Teams. All of it sits inside a legal structure that does not require a warrant served to the account holder and does not require notice before access is compelled. Europe found this out because it happened to people whose names became politically inconvenient at the wrong moment. Most Americans will never have a reason to think their data is politically inconvenient to anyone, but most is not all. And the legal mechanism does not care which side of the Atlantic the data belongs to. Europe's governments are now spending real money, real political capital, and real institutional energy building walls around their own data. Not because it was convenient, but because they had no choice once the alternative became visible. The question worth carrying forward is simple. Who is building those walls for you? June 2026 may end up remembered as the month the world's institutions stopped treating digital sovereignty as optional. Not because they wanted to make that decision, because one leaked file made it impossible to keep pretending the decision could wait.